Hey, I'm Beth Houf, the proud principal of Fulton Middle School.
And Erica Hogan, assistant principal.
And we want to talk a little bit about the power of restorative practices and specifically restorative circles at Fulton Middle School. We started really 2 years ago digging deeper into restorative practices and how it can best meet the needs of all of our students, but especially our students that have had high experiences with ACE scores and trauma and that just really are struggling. And what we found though is the great thing about restorative practices and restorative circles is it works with all kids, but especially kids that have had extra struggles. So the first thing we did is we actually, we talked to our staff, we talked to our leadership team, and we really wanted to focus on all of us collectively increasing our knowledge of restorative practices. So we went through a book study of hacking school discipline, and then is also decided to pilot Behavior Flip, which was the only restorative online behavior management system that we could find. And so we were able to really look at that as well. So what that looked like is that a lot of time spent, I said that in a quick sentence, but really we spent a lot of time, didn't we, getting ownership from our staff on this.
Not just kicking off the school year saying that this is what we're going to do, but continuing, getting into classrooms, making sure they were doing it the right way and continuing to do it the right way.
Exactly. It was an intentional focus from the very beginning when we spent our back to school PD reading together. This included our teachers. This also included all of our staff. So our paras were part of that PD as well. And so sometimes that back to school time, we say something's important, but we don't make time for it. So we made sure that. Then we also have team meetings every week, and our professional development continued to be focused on this as well. And then we would go in classrooms. Not only would we train though, we would have people bring ideas back, how did this go in your classroom? We kicked the school year off really, and everyone was using circles just to get to know kids. And so I think that piece of using circles before they have to be used for working through a problem, I think that really helped us a lot too.
Right, because nothing ever bad happens in middle school.
Right?
Or it does, the 2020 school year,
yeah.
right?
It's definitely been a year of challenges, and I think that at the beginning of the year we really looked a lot of our circles were Ms. Hogan is talking too much in the classroom, and so the kids would process through that, but then quickly that changed. You want to talk to us a little about our first
So in October we had a full school lockdown where students, teachers barricading the doors. So coming back to school after such an emotional day, it happened on a Friday, so we had the weekend to process, but teachers, students coming back in on that following Monday, it was great that we already had the practices of circles in place because we were able to go straight into circles to really process what happened.
Yeah, to really start that healing process. And I think what was so amazing is even that day of the lockdown, because for 47 minutes, our staff and our kids thought that we had an active shooter. And I think that what was amazing to see and to hear from our staff is they immediately went into circles even that day. They're like, we got to talk about this. And I think that's not necessarily the norm. I think, Ms. Hogan, we've talked about this a lot. Middle schoolers don't care as much about what we think as they used to. It's not cool to care about what, it's more about peers. And so when the peers are working through problems together and the teacher is more of the facilitator, it's been huge.
Circles allow every student to have a voice in a productive way and allows students to hear their peers express how they're feeling and how it's affecting them in the classroom.
Completely. I had the chance to pull some kiddos earlier this year and just ask them a little bit more on, what do you like about doing circles? What do you not like so much? And I think some of the kids said, the same people like to go on and on and on and on. And I was like, okay, well, we probably need to norm up our circles a little bit. So that was good feedback to take back to our staff and say, okay, let's process and problem solve through this. We found that we really had to stick to norms. That we really had to make sure that even just doing it in a circular, sometimes circles were going ping ponging back and forth, and then that would take the flow out. And the circle is actually very intentional. Also having a talking piece was something that was super. Of course, now that we have gone through a pandemic, we might not have a shared talking stick as much. So we might have to figure out a different way of doing that. But I think that just making sure the processes and structures of it is in place, and then that as the adults in the room, that we're honoring the voices of our kids. They have a lot to say, and they have a lot of really insightful things to say when we take time to listen and we give every student a voice. A couple of really powerful circles. One that I wanted to share is I had the chance to go in. I was actually going in to observe a first year teacher, her last observation, and they were circled up. And she's like, well, we're circling right now. I was like, actually, if you're okay, we'd like to stay in. And they had been really disrespectful to her. And she wasn't in tears, but she was her cheeks were pink. She was not one that really got flustered very easily. And she was sharing her frustrations with her kids, and watching the kids transform the feeling in the room was truly amazing. I think sometimes we think middle schoolers don't care about the thoughts and feelings of others, when really it's such a super impulsive time. That healing circle, like, it was so great, because when they left, I stayed the whole rest of the time. And one thing I want to mention too, for administrators watching this, is I always ask permission if I can join the circle, because sometimes what they're talking about, it's not necessarily, they might not want me in there, or I might stifle the conversation. And so I always ask permission before I join a circle. Sidebar. So do you want to share one of our other really powerful
I think
circles?
For me, I'm not really one that shares my feelings a lot. And so unfortunately, we had a student that passed away. And we went into a classroom where they had created, they were just very close. It was a theater class, and they had really gotten close to each other. So that class specifically was taking it pretty hard. Mrs. Huff and I went in there, and Mrs. Huff said, it's okay to, even if you don't want to share how you're feeling, like, acknowledge that. So I remember passing the stick around, and I myself probably would have just taken the stick and passed it, but there were other students in there, some boys specifically, who said, like, they didn't want to handle the emotions that their classmates, there were people crying in there. And they said, I need to leave. And I said, you need to stay here for your classmates. And they said, you're right. And so sharing, as they were going around, for myself, I realized I needed to share that I'm not a sharer. I don't want to express how I'm feeling, but I acknowledge that, because I think that was an important piece of that as well. Mm-hmm. So that was pretty memorable for me as well, for all the students to see how everybody was handling it, and how everybody handles things a little bit differently in those tough situations.
And it's okay to do that. I think sometimes we try to either make ourselves or make our kids suppress feelings, or conform to a norm of how you're supposed to grieve. And grief has many steps and many processes, and trauma comes in so many different shapes. And so many of our kids have only seen fight, flight, freeze, and for them to actually sit there and work through that, I think it was huge. And so again, kind of in closing, I mean, we really can't speak enough to the power of restorative practices. We've dramatically decreased our discipline referrals. The last quarter was 0 because we weren't here, but still, like, the thing is we didn't spend less time with discipline, though, because we spent so much time and energy talking through the problem. We're figuring out how we're going to repair the harm. There were some kids, they weren't going to repair the harm. So then, okay, that's your choice. Then you're going to have consequences either way. And I think it's been a culture shift of every behavior is typically a form of communication. Mm-hmm. And as the adults in the building, when we can, you can't punish trauma. You can't punish the adolescent brain as much for its own personal development. And it's been a transformational process for our school, for sure.
And I think it's been helpful to teach our kids and our adults, because sometimes as adults, we walk away from hard conversations or hard problems, and it really, I think, helped us build this culture of, we're going to talk about the problem and we're going to come up with a solution for it together.
I think that's a huge point to end on too, is that it's not just about talking about the problem. If you're not being solution focused, then a circle could be seen as something that's not productive in your class. But I know I definitely, the classes that were the most well-run, the most, the highest culture of, positivity and achievement are those that were very solution-oriented. Yes, we're going to do this circle, but we need to make sure if there's a problem, we're going to figure out how to solve it. So we would be happy if you would like to reach out to us. If you'd like to talk to any of our staff, I know they would be happy to talk to you as well. You can find us Fulton Middle School, Fulton, Missouri. Please reach out. We have a website that has all of our information on it. We appreciate you taking time to listen to this. Take care.